Assalamu alaikum. My name is Aaminah Qadir, and I'm extremely honored to be here today with the Honorable Justice Saman Riffat Imtiaz. A brief introduction before we start. Justice Saman Riffat Imtiaz obtained her BBA degree in 1998 from the American University of Dubai and secured her Juris Doctorate in the year 2001 from the University of Richmond, Virginia. She was licensed then to practice from the state of Maryland. She started her career in Karachi in the year 2004 and then was successfully running her practice, specializing in corporate commercial banking and constitutional law. She took oath as an additional judge of the Islamabad High Court on 17 December 2021 and is the second female to be appointed to this distinguished position. She had officially assumed the role of a permanent judge of the Islamabad High Court on the 29th of November 2022. Before I hand over to Justice Saman, who we're here to actually hear from, I just want to highlight a few of the very key and distinguished judgments she has passed that uphold women's rights in the workplace as well as in marriage. Recently, she held that a woman does not have to forego her right to dower, even when asking for khula, where she has been compelled to seek such khula on account of acts and omissions of the husband. And such acts and omissions can include cruel behavior, and even that the court can grant her the deferred amount of dower in such cases. She has also passed a judgment on workplace harassment, where she upheld the decision of an ombudsperson, which was later challenged before the president and overturned. She upheld the decision of the ombudsperson in favor of the employee alleging harassment, stating that, in fact, the harassment did occur and the president's order did not consider some key facts. She also held that the CRPC, which is the Criminal Procedure Code, will not govern proceedings before the ombudsperson. What this means in common terms is that the woman was able to obtain substantive justice and her case was not knocked out on the basis of technicalities. So I'm extremely excited to be here with Justice Saman today, and I'm honored, in fact, because to see a woman on the bench and such a distinguished and honorable guest with us today is just great. So I would just like to welcome her here today. And I would request that, Justice Saman, can you walk us through your journey from when you started to now being the only female justice on the bench of the Islamabad High Court? Please tell us all about it.
Thank you, Aaminah. Can everybody hear me? Thank you, Aaminah, for those kind words. But actually, I would like to start talking about before I started my journey in the field of law. Believe it or not, initially I wanted to go to art school when I was a student myself. And I was, I think, around the age of 15 or 16 when my family ran into some financial trouble. My father passed on when I was barely over a year old, so my mother was a single parent. And so that bit of bad luck financially actually was a very good lesson for me about the importance of financial independence for women. And it is at that time that I decided that I needed to choose a career which guaranteed me that financial independence. And I'm talking about mid to late 90s, where we didn't have, I don't even know if Pakistan offers career counseling to schools even today, but back then there was no such concept. Plus, we didn't have access to the internet like you guys do now. So, you have a lot more avenues to gain information than we did. What was a popular choice back then was an MBA degree. So I was pursuing my BBA degree when I stumbled across business law. That was a course that was required in order to graduate, but I had a lot of misconceptions about the field of law. My understanding was that I would be spending nights learning laws by rote, because there weren't any lawyers back then in my family or even amongst friends. So I chose to take the course because it was required to graduate. I had to do it, but I chose to take it during the summer because it was a shorter term. So I thought the ordeal would be shorter. Plus, one of my favorite instructors of the time was teaching the course. So I ended up taking it. And little did I know that it would be a life-altering course, because that is when I decided to change my career path and take up law instead of pursuing an MBA. I have to admit that I think I owe my career to Dr. Joanne Shams, my instructor, who taught me so well and inspired me so much that I wanted to take it up as a long-term profession. And I don't know how many in the audience are lawyers, or how many are those who are aspiring to become lawyers or considering law school. So I would like to also mention my introduction to law. Dr. Joanne Shams made us read this fictional judgment that was written and published in the Harvard Law Review in the 1940s. It's called the case of the Spelunchian explorers. I don't know if anyone is familiar, but if you are not, I would strongly recommend, especially the ones who are aspiring to become lawyers or who are already in the field, to read it. And actually, it's a very good read even for non-legal practitioners. It was a fictional judgment that was published in the Harvard Law Review, as I mentioned, about a group of explorers who lose their way and get trapped in a cave in a fictional land. And there are about 6 or 7 of them. It's been a long time since I read it last time, so my memory may not be serving me exactly right. But the group of 6 or 7, out of desperation, because they reached a point where they were dying of starvation. So they decided amongst themselves that in order to survive till help arrives, they will have to come up with some way. And what they came up with was to feed off of each other. And coincidentally, one of them had a pair of dice in his pocket. So they decided amongst themselves that the roll of die would decide who they would feed on first, and so on and so forth. So by the time help arrived, only 3 or 4 of them were left who had killed their companions and survived by feeding off of them. So they were charged with murder, and this fictional judgment is about whether to convict them or not. And it's a mind-blowing analysis, because the fictional judgment includes the opinion of 4 to 5 different fictional justices. And that was my introduction to law. It exposed me to the study of law. Each opinion is as compelling as the other. And by the end of the judgment, the reader really does not know what the right answer is. But the beauty of it lies in the analysis. So one judge, for example, wrote that, in their circumstances, they could not be judged by the positive law that governs people in society. And they were governed by natural law. And so they did the best they could. Another justice challenged that theory and said that, well, at what point did they leave the jurisdiction of positive law? Is it because of their circumstances that we will hold that they were not governed by our law that governs our jurisdiction, or was it geography? And then there was another justice who decided that, well, due to the compelling circumstances, they should be let off the hook, but the law as it exists in our jurisdiction does not allow me to reach that decision, and judges are bound to decide in accordance with the law, but perhaps the executive, which has the power to pardon, can do so. And of course, there was a strong critique by other brother judges about how they were passing the buck on to the executive. But I don't want to go into too many details. I think it's worth a read, and you should read it yourself. I just wanted to give enough to kind of pique your interest. And perhaps like me, anyone who is a little bit unsure about taking up the field of law may be convinced after reading this judgment. So that was the reason I decided to shift careers and go for law. And when something is meant to be, everything works out like clockwork. So it was my senior year when I had taken this, this course, and I had just enough time to take the LSAT, which is the entrance exam that you need to pass in order to get into a law school in the US. And the results came just in time for me to apply for the fall season of this subsequent year. And I got waitlisted by my first choice, but fortunately I was offered admission at the University of Richmond in Virginia, which I decided to accept, and the rest, as they say, is history. I practiced for a little bit in the US before I returned to Pakistan, because the plan was always to return to Pakistan. I never intended to make the United States my home, and I wanted to serve my own country. So in 2004, when I returned to Karachi, I joined Mohsen Tayyab Ali and Company, where I worked for about 5 years. And thereafter, I joined Kabraji and Talibuddin, which is also a big name in Karachi. And after that, I joined Makhdoom Ali Khan Sahab. I've had the good fortune of working with him. And that was the last firm I worked at. After that, I decided to try my own luck and set up shop, as they say, which, alhamdulillah, worked out well. And I was running my private practice for over almost 11 years before I was offered this position of justice at the Islamabad High Court, which I decided to accept. And I was also fortunate to have been confirmed a year later, and here I am now.
Thank you for this really inspirational story towards how you got here. I'll just ask a few questions on what you've told us so far. So a lot of lawyers, for example, when they're successful in their private practice, the transition to the judiciary is sometimes something that one might not consider. What prompted you to leave a successful practice to join the judiciary?
So, in my opinion, it's just a natural progression. Some people may not agree with me, but I feel that every litigator at some point does want to be on the bench. Much as I enjoy litigation, you do realize, you could reach a point in your career where you realize that if you want to make far-reaching changes, then it's got to be on the bench. Although, of course, lawyers are also the driving force behind, societal changes. But I felt that there comes a time when you feel that the real power resides in the bench. And if you want to see positive changes in society, then I think every litigator at some point does consider joining the bench. And when the offer was made to me, I thought it was the right time. I was the right age. But I also thought that personally and professionally, I was ready for it.
Was it a no-brainer for you? Or were there pros and cons that you had to weigh out before you took the offer?
I think as far as joining the bench is concerned, I was ready for it. What required a little bit of thinking was the fact that I had to leave my hometown. So I was not expecting the offer to have come from the Islamabad High Court. If anything, I would have imagined it would have been the Sindh High Court, which is where I practice as a litigator. But, God works in mysterious ways, and the offer came from the Islamabad High Court. I'm very, very glad that I made the right decision in accepting it. And yeah.
And can you tell us a little bit about what it's like to be the only female justice on the bench? Day-to-day experiences, perhaps legally, as well as just, the day-to-day of being the only woman there.
So, I had worked even as a lawyer, it is a male-dominated profession. So I had almost become used to being the only woman in most rooms. So that part of it was not very new. By this time, I was used to being either one of very few women. But I think the real adjustment was probably on the part of my colleagues, because I am used to working with men and being the only woman, but my colleagues, I don't know how much experience they had of working with women. So it was probably more of a learning curve for them. But I have to say I'm blessed with very, very good colleagues who've been very supportive throughout, who have been very welcoming in sharing the space with me. That is something that I think we'll also talk about. How traditionally, because the workplace has been dominated by men, they almost feel subconsciously that it belongs to them, and they view women as encroachers. So I have to say that that is not something I experienced as a judge. Perhaps as a lawyer in the beginning, in my initial years, I did feel that way. But as a judge, I've been very fortunate and blessed to have some very supportive group of colleagues.
So that brings me neatly to my next question, which is you talk about the legal space generally being male-dominated. Like you, I also had the pleasure and luck of working with Maktoum Ali Khan, and he is very encouraging towards promoting women in the law field, in litigation. But most places I've noticed do not have the same level of encouragement. So when girls are starting out at the start of their career, I often feel that they get deterred from court practice. So based on your own experience, there are some women who trailblaze and get through it. But for most women, it's really difficult with family pressure, with pressure from the workplace, from the environment. So what advice would you give young women who are starting out, who have the passion, but perhaps do not have the facilities around them to support them? How would you encourage them to take the space?
I would say focus. You need to be focused on your goals, your objectives, and that helps you drown out the voices of detractors. And I think that is the answer I gave some years ago when a male colleague of mine asked me and some other female practitioners how we survive in an environment which can oftentimes be toxic for women. And that was my answer: by remaining focused. If you're not focused on your goals, then yes, it would become very, very difficult to survive. But I just recalled that I was listening to an interview of the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg the other day. And the interviewer asked her what was the best advice that she got. And she said that the best advice she got was from her mother-in-law the day of her marriage, who told her that the secret to a good marriage is being a little deaf at times. And she said that that is actually an advice that I followed not just in her marriage, but also at the workplace. So sometimes you need to tune out. Sometimes you need to tune out. Not everything is meant for you to react to, because, you have to, these are your colleagues, men will be your clients, men will be your colleagues, men are mostly the ones who are occupying the bench for the time being. So if you are intending to be a litigator, you will be appearing before, male judges, you will be appearing against opposing counsel who is most likely going to be male. Your clients, like I said, will be male. So you have to develop a thick skin at times. You have to be selective about what you want to react to and what you don't. Sometimes with perseverance, you will also be able to turn your detractors into allies. And that's very important. So, for example, in my own case, when I started out my career, there were very few women litigators, and hardly any who actually appeared and actually argued. The most that you would see would be, junior associates carrying their senior's file and, following them around, or at the most asking for an adjournment. And in the firm that I worked at, I was the only female associate. And that is where I experienced that my male colleagues at the firm initially felt I was encroaching their space. And there were difficult times, there were, inappropriate comments that were made. Sometimes there was, conduct that they engaged in to make sure that I don't succeed. And in fact, for example, if there's a piece of information that I want, they would give me the wrong piece of information, and then when the boss is around, they would have a different answer to give, making me look bad. So things of that nature. The way I dealt with it is not necessarily something I would advocate for the young girls to deal with today. And the reason is because you've got safety in numbers today. You still have a lot more women in the profession now than we did back when I started, which was almost more than 20 years ago. And like I said, I was the only female in that firm. My thought process at that time was that here is an associate who is far more senior than me, who is far more useful to my boss than I am. And I was afraid that if I would call him out or, report him, then the senior would view me as the nuisance. Yes. Because I did not have enough to justify. It would have been easier to let go of me than him, is the way I thought. Now, in my experience, that worked for me. Because over a period of time, I was able to win over this particular associate that I'm talking about. And eventually, I was able to earn his respect as well, just out of, by working very, very hard, ignoring some things and then taking a stand on other things. But, you have to strike a delicate balance because you cannot afford to, I think what I'm trying to say is that you need to choose your battles and you need to build allies. You cannot afford to have an attitude where you block certain people out just because they've made a few inappropriate comments, because at the end of the day, you might be the one to lose out. Having said that, coming back to today's time and age, nowadays I feel that because there are more women, and I do feel that women, through their success, have convinced employers that they are a useful resource to have, that not only are they just as good as male practitioners, but in some cases they are more reliable, and administratively they're more responsible. In my experience as well, as far as male lawyers are concerned, because of the way our society functions, being the breadwinners and what have you, they show very little qualms in joining another firm if they're, offered a better pay, or jumping ship and going in-house, or, there was a time when almost everyone I knew would work for a little bit in a Pakistani firm and then try to find employment in the Middle East. So there was a lot of turnover. Whereas women, if they are given good work opportunities, and if they feel that their goals are being realized, their professional goals, they're being given those opportunities by their employer, and they have a safe environment, then they prefer to continue to work in that firm or with that employer on the long term, and they're even if they are offered a better pay elsewhere. Because women value relationships, and of course a safe environment is something which is very important for a woman to have. So if an employer can provide a woman that, then he has someone who's going to work out well in the long term. So point being that because by now I think most employers have that sense that women can be a valuable resource, that if you raise your voice against inappropriate behavior on the part of your colleagues or other lawyers perhaps in the court, then you are likely to find an ally in your boss.
So I have a follow-up question on this. So interestingly, I think I might have joined practice 10 years after you, and I was also the only female in the law firm that I was working at. And I would often hear anecdotally from other people that, Miss Saman Riffat was also the only female. And in my personal experience, I experienced a lot of inappropriate comments and a lot of harassment in a male-dominated workspace. And I would block it out, but I felt that it did come in the way of my work. And eventually, I decided to leave for a while and go to London and take up a job offer I had there before I came back to Pakistan. So my question to you would be that, do you feel that it is this kind of navigation is just unique to females? Do females, are we the only ones who are exposed to this? Or do you feel that males also perhaps have to navigate through different pressures? Because how do we prevent females from from it impacting their work production and quality if they have so many additional challenges in the workspace?
No, I think, this profession is not easy for anyone. Whether male or female, it is a difficult profession. But women have to deal with these added issues, which, at least in my experience, I could be wrong, but in my experience, it's only women who have to deal with this aspect. Because there is a tendency in our society, in our culture, that people think, men especially, think that it is their right and, in fact, duty to mansplain things to women. So you will have a lot of people being intrusive who you won't find that with other, with men your age, that they will not be subjected to unsolicited advice the way a young woman might. Then, as you mentioned, harassment or inappropriate comments or behavior at the workplace, which now constitutes harassment as per the definition of that word in the law. That I do think is something unique to, unfortunately, women's experience. And I'm very sorry to hear that you had to face it to an extent that you felt that you needed to take a break. And I'm glad that you've spoken about it as well, because this is a message to all the men out there who constitute the work environment for young women. You need to be mindful that this is not something that only, the workplace is not something that belongs to you. It's not your fiefdom. Yes, women might be new entrants into the field into the workforce, but we have as much right to be here as any of you. And just because you are, you have a greater number at the workplace does not mean that you make that space uncomfortable for your female colleagues. To the point that you could drive somebody away from their goals in life and away from their objectives or their dreams. And to all those men out there, I mean, would you want to be that person who steals somebody's dreams? I would think not. So that there is some soul searching that is required for all of us to do. And, but I do want to say that while you will come across a lot of those people who will play a negative role in your career path, you will find a lot of allies as well. I mean, I think it would be very unfair for me to not give enough credit to the male allies who have made it possible for me to sit here today. I could not have done it alone. Nobody can do it alone. And being a male-dominated profession, I did need that help and support from my male colleagues and seniors as well. And here I would like to mention that, perseverance helps, because starting out where a male colleague was making the workplace very uncomfortable for me, and for me, making it difficult for me to perform at my best, from a point where I earned his professional respect, was a huge achievement, I would say. And from, stepping out of the firm, you meet so many lawyers in the courtroom as well that you befriend and, you develop relations with. In the beginning, I do remember being ridiculed at times as well. There was a lot of skepticism for various different reasons. Number one was that, you don't expect women to last in the work field. The idea is that, oh, she's here just to bide her time till she finds a husband and then she'll disappear. So I did face such comments as well, questioning my professionalism, questioning my ambition. I don't like to talk big, so I knew that time would tell. And so that's when you have to be a little deaf. When I started my own private practice and I was trying to generate business, I would send my profile to various companies and arrange meetings with litigation heads and so on and so forth. And I remember one particular meeting where the litigation head actually said to my face that ladkiyon ko to kuch nahi aata. So from that to that company becoming my best client in terms of volume. So these things happen, but you have to keep at it. I think that the key is perseverance. So, I mean, I could give you so many different examples of how I have seen attitudes changing, from skepticism to sometimes being ridiculed, to a point in time where your male colleagues will come and seek your guidance, will ask you for advice, will ask for copies of the stay orders that you've got, so that they can follow them. To young men coming up to you in the courtroom and asking if you could help them out in their cases. So I've seen this happen, I've seen this change, this shift in a matter of 18, 19 years of my practice, where through hard work and perseverance, I compelled my colleagues to change their views about the capabilities of a woman. And to a certain point, to reach a point where they didn't think it was an ego issue for them to ask for my advice. So my message to all those women who are facing pressure at the present time is to keep at it. Don't give up. You will need a lot of willpower to do it, but trust me, you've got it within you. And if you keep at it, things will change. And these same people who are making your life miserable right now, you might be surprised, might become your allies in the future.
Thank you for this very insightful advice. And so when I hire women, I have a public interest litigation law firm. It's called Sheher, but written like she, her. So it's meant to be a collective or city of women. So I try to hire only women. One of the challenges I face is that, and Indri, I know he talks about this a lot, about how when you are a woman in a top position, the expectations of personal life balance are much greater on you than they are on male counterparts. So whether women are asked to be in taking care of family members who are ill, whether they have to take care of kids, a lot of girls who work for me drop out of the job when a family member is ill, even though they have brothers, and they may perhaps be earning the same amount. What do you feel from your perspective of where you stand now in a position that is a position of power and a position where you have to balance different things versus also when you started and you really at that time required, I suppose, a lot more balancing in terms of establishing yourself first?
Yeah. No, that is definitely a challenge, and that has to do with the societal expectations and norms and the gender roles that society has come to define and to impose, which perhaps at a certain time period might have made sense, but they have no place in today's day and age. But as a society, we are still holding on to them without realizing, without questioning whether there is any need to justify those gender roles or not. And you're absolutely right. I have also seen such examples. A friend of mine who actually quit work when her father fell ill, but she was able to come back to work after a few years. And I have to commend that, without taking any names, joined a very big Pakistani company in Karachi who is very, very supportive of women, and by that time she had 3 boys. So they gave her all the support that is required by a working mother, and she was able to successfully make her come back into the workforce, even though she took some gap years. So there are examples of that, but again, you know, the most important thing is for you yourself as the woman to have that focus and perseverance. And if you do, you will find people and organizations who are willing to lend you a helping hand and, you know, give you what it is required for you to sustain yourself in this field. Having said that, I think we still have a long way to go. This reminds me of what Justice Aisha Malik mentioned yesterday, last night, that, you know, it is a man's world. So how we behave, how we conduct, what is considered professional, what is not considered professional, is dictated by how men view the world and how men view these sort of things. The whole you know, work life and the work day is designed for a man. And I remember when I was practicing law, I was one of the founding members of this association called the Women Lawyers Association. And we had jointly, or 2 of our members had written this article which was supported by the Women Lawyers Association as a whole, which got a lot of backlash. And it explored the hindrances that women face in either joining the field of law or surviving. Because you do see a lot of women joining, but they're not able to sustain. If they survive marriage, then they're not able to survive motherhood. And there are a few examples, such as the friend of mine that I was mentioning, who made a comeback, but there are very few of those. One of the challenges was the timing. So in Karachi at least, the way most firms operate is that they are attending court from 8:30 till 1:30 in the afternoon, and then the lead litigator takes a siesta for a few hours because, you know, he's got a wife to take care of the children. So he can afford to take that few hours to spend with the wife or, you know, the children, then come back to work at 5 o'clock or thereabouts in the afternoon and carry on till late in the night. In fact, I remember attending a meeting at a colleague's firm around 7:30 in the evening, and after half an hour, I saw the wife coming with the 2 children, because, you know, it would have been their bedtime by the time he returned home. But they can afford to do it. How many women can afford to do that? Because how many men would put the kids to bed while the wife is at work? Our whole societal setup is such that there is no question of that happening. So at firms like that, where the boss is coming in at 5 o'clock and needs his associates to be there from 5 o'clock till 11 o'clock, how many women will survive after a certain age? So does that work as a barrier? Yes, it works as a barrier. There was a lot of backlash against the article, which I still haven't been able to understand why, because it's not necessarily blaming anyone, but it's highlighting the reasons why you don't see that many women last in this profession. And I had a similar situation when I became a judge. I had a female steno who had to leave work at 3 o'clock. And usually that was the time that we would get done with our single and division benches. So I didn't know how I could work with those timings. And I asked my Chief Justice at the time that, you know, perhaps I should be given 2 women in accordance with Article 17 of the Qanun-e-Shahadat order, so that one could do the morning shift and the other could do the afternoon shift. But there was no question of the husband, you know, taking care of the kids at that time, and one parent had to be home. So these are real challenges, and we've got to work together to find solutions.
How did you find a solution for the steno? Were you given two stenos or was
I
it
was
replaced
not.
by a male?
I was not. They had to replace her. And so she then went to the branch office, which works out fine because, you know, in the branch office, once the court hours are over, then the staff is ready to leave.
So now being on the side of, now you're looking at things from a very different perspective as to when you were arguing cases. When you look as a judge towards litigants before you, males, females, how do you think we can make the courts more friendly for females?
So I think the best way to make courts friendly for females is for there to be more females in the courtroom, because I still remember what it was like walking into the Sindh High Court for the very first time, especially the bar room. It was daunting. And you know, I've always gone to co-educational institutions and had worked abroad before that as well. So working alongside men was not something new or novel.